and the GW Office of Integrative Medicine and Health. Welcome to A Mindfulness Experience. AIM is a nonprofit organization with the mission to provide vulnerable and low-income communities with access to whole person health and wellness. The GW Office of Integrative Medicine and Health promotes integrative medicine by providing learning opportunities to health professionals and healthcare consumers. Today's facilitators are Dr. Sahar Swidan, a clinical pharmacist, president and CEO of Pharmacy Solutions in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and an adjunct professor at the GW School of Medicine and Health Sciences. She'll be joined by Yael Flusberg, who is a Reiki master teacher, a board-certified polarity therapist, a yoga therapist, a leadership coach, an organizational facilitator, and a poet. All right, over to you, Dr. Kogan.
Well, it's super exciting to have regulars. It always makes life a lot easier. I don't have to pretend that I don't know, or that I don't have to pretend that I know them. I actually do know them. Anyway, so we have a pretty busy schedule. I'm sure everybody's aware of a mix and match that just occurred. I'm sure you guys have gazillion questions about that. So we asked Dr. Swidan and Yael to be a little shorter. I'm sort of thinking maybe what we should do right away. I'll say just the 60 seconds of what happened, and then everybody start throwing the questions, and then I'll sort of take a stock as to where we are, and if we have to, at around 10 minutes, we'll go straight to Dr. Swidan, even if we still have a list of questions. And then if we overly, and there's still too many questions, we'll have to push them to the next week. So first thing, that FDA approved Moderna at half dose. I don't know if that means it's already in the pharmacies or not. I haven't actually looked at that. And the second is, shockingly, the CDC, I mean, I was saying this all along, remember 6 months ago that mix and match will probably, so the CDC not only said it's fine, they're actually saying it's probably better, which is shocking. Now, that's better doesn't really, to me, address tons of practical questions. For example, are you going to cross over from the mRNA to DNA? Or if you had DNA, should you cross over to mRNA? There's not a lot of actual clarity from the studies in that, except for the England, which basically studies saying it seems to be safe, and as to efficacy, it seems to be equivocal. So probably doesn't matter. My take on the literature is, forget the Pfizer booster if you can get Moderna. That's the way I'm reading this. But that's what I think I said in the last couple of weeks. That has nothing to do with crossover per se. It's just the fact that Moderna seems to be a bit more effective. And plus the dosing here is maybe to blame. So Pfizer vaccine is 30 micrograms versus Moderna is 100, and the booster is 50. So that's one in 1 minute. And then, of course, this whole thing with kids coming up, 5 to 12, they're going to start getting vaccinated probably 2 to 3 weeks from now. That's been approved. It's just not really clear as to what the logistics of it going to be. They haven't actually released a date when it's going to start. So with that, then there was one long question, which I guess I should... I think I'm going to hold that question till to see if there is a possibility. It was emailed earlier. I just want to see if there are more practical, shorter questions. Yeah, so Elizabeth, exactly. If you got 2 Pfizers, basically what CDC says, fine to go get Moderna. Question is Moderna better? There's not a lot of clarity on that. My take on the current situation is yes. But don't quote me on that. I don't think I can back this up by a clear science. The reality is probably, in reality, probably doesn't matter. I'm trying to sort of just anticipate what is about to happen further out research-wise, but it's not an evidenced answer. Oh, less questions than anticipated. Nice. Okay, if you got J&J, would you really try for? Right, so that's the caveat. The J&J vaccine authorized to be the booster to be given 2 months after the first one, which to me is really strange because the others has to be at least 6. this is a little bit of a tricky point. If you got J&J because you're afraid of new technology, I say for your psychological sake, go get another J&J. The problem with J&J, it's the only vaccine that absolutely clearly documented to have horrendous side effects. They're just exceedingly rare, but they're bad. That clotting disorder is a, ITP, idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. That's the bad news. There is almost no treatment for it. The treatment is serious. It's like it's a plasma transfer, plasmapheresis. It's an exchange of plasma. It's not a walk in the park. They've been rare, but they've been there. And to me, in fact, I see the new technologies appearing to be a little bit safer. That's just, again, don't quote me on this. CDC said whatever. That's what they're basically saying. Cross if you want. No safety concerns. Nobody knows exact efficacy. It's probably all within 10% rounding error, so we don't care. That's basically how you should be reading this. But the reality is you can't really think of it that way, right? Because we're humans and we, of course, have our own biases. So my point is, if you're afraid of crossing over, fine. If you're not afraid, go ahead and get Moderna after J&J. Well, so right, that's the key question. So who needs to, this is not necessarily today's conversation, but who does need boosters? That's the whole point, right? So the guidance on this is pretty clear right now. If you're immune compromised, if you're 65 plus, or if you have certain types of conditions that are considered high risk, that's where things get a little tricky. You should be 6 months out, you should be getting the booster. If you're not in any of those categories, it doesn't matter that it's 6, 8, 12 months, whatever, there is no guidance. They're basically saying, don't, I'm not getting it. Even though I am eligible as a first-line healthcare worker. What they're pointing towards is this. It's not all about whether you still have antibodies. The thinking is you probably do. It's also about what is the chance of a large exposure. So as a first-line worker, I'm probably more likely to have a large exposure, except that I don't. I only work in a hospital 1 week out of every so many months. I'm in a clinic one-on-one with patients once a week, and the rest it's all telemedicine. I don't consider myself at high risk. I'm not working in an emergency room. I never see really sick patients. They wouldn't be coming to see me. And the hospital is a controlled environment for me because if the patient is really sick, I know about it. I'm not a primary, I'm a consultant. I know every patient I'm seeing. They don't just randomly appear on my schedule. So that's why I made this decision. So if you're worried about having a high exposure, whatever the reason is, and that can be additional personal questions, then you should probably get a booster, even if you're younger. Period. So like for some of you here on the call, like some of you, I know you're working in a healthcare settings, you need to think through this a little bit, especially if you have a potential for unpredictable exposures. Just saying. The inoculum, the amount of possible exposure in one setting, that's the word, inoculum, means a lot. Because even if you're fully protected, but your immunity started to go down, but your inoculum is huge, you could be in trouble. Okay, I'll leave it at that. All right, there's a few other questions, and I'll start at 210 on the button. No, I don't think I've ever said Pfizer as 3-dose regimen. Maybe I said something earlier that now I should be regretting. I don't know. No, so if you had 3 Pfizer shots, you're done. Don't consider anything else. This was a personal question, actually, sorry. Do you have a current opinion about the social justice implication of getting boosters when 5% of people enough? No, I don't. Here's the reasoning. We can't, like, those of you who follow me closer, I just talked about this on the Sputnik radio for about 20 minutes with Sean, what's his name? They get me on a morning show for, it's called, what's it called? Whatever, I don't remember. Anyway, so it's the whole point. No, I don't, because we're not in charge of other countries. We don't want to impose on them our vaccines. It's their job to obtain them. If they're asking us, then yes. You know, if somebody will come to us and say, look, we would like to get this vaccine, but there's a lot of imposing going on. Who are we to say to another government vaccinate? Like, are we going to go to New Zealand and change their policies? Why are we making decisions for other countries? So I don't feel too bad about it. You know, I understand there are poor nations that have poor access to this because it's not made. The reality is that's not the only problem, period. You know, and we just need to try to vaccinate as many people as possible. It's not only based on this issue, although I agree with this issue, it's a problem, but it's a much more complex political problem that I'm willing to even get into, because it's not simply let's give everybody vaccines because we have them. It's a bit more complicated. Wise government should be involved in this. Those countries could directly approach Pfizer, Moderna, and deal with them, and then leave alone the government, so then we don't get in any trouble. Anyway, it's beyond more complicated. I think it's really WHO that should be dealing with this, not particular country. All right. Oh, I'm a minute over. So Cuba's vaccines, I actually don't know about. Great question. I'll look that up. I bet that they have something special. They always do. I'm very pro-Cuban. I love the place. I've never been to. I'm dying to go, especially since I really can't dance any salsa. I suck at it. I mean, I've learned it for years, but I know. And Cuban salsa is really cool. Like, it's really hard and really cool and really fast. So I really gotta learn. Okay, off to Dr. Swidan. I took too much time, but I knew there would be questions.
Oh yeah, no, don't worry. I can gab as fast or as slow as we need. I can curate the talk. Don't worry. Okay, can you guys see my screen? I have these 3 screens now, and I don't know what you're seeing.
Yeah, we're good. We see your slides. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to make this a little bit shorter just because of the amount of questions. So what I wanted to do today is really talk about what I call inflammatology and immune system optimization. Obviously, the past 2 years has really been in the forefront of, you know, how broke is really our healthcare system to some degree, the amount of inflammation and immune dysregulation that really we have as a country, and what are things that break it, and what can we do to really optimize our immune system. Because at the end of the day, really most diseases now, as we find out in medicine, is really related to ITs, and I give a lecture called the inflammatology, the only medical specialty left. Because now heart disease, cancer, autoimmune, you know, it's all really related to immune dysregulation. So what is a properly functioning immune system? Obviously, it's surveillance. It's always looking for badness, if you will, and it tries to attack these things. But there's also checks and balances, right? There's internal regulation. And so the cytokine storm that we heard so much about, for example, this past year and a half with COVID, is really a dysregulated system. So that's when our immune system basically goes haywire and nuts, and it can't control the attack, if you will. So definitely there's checks and balances, but sometimes, unfortunately, these go out of control, right? We also develop tolerance, right? We don't want our system to attack everything that it sees. We want it to just basically kind of survey, look to see, hey, are you friend or foe? And how can we better articulate the attack? Obviously, inflammation is good, and a certain amount of inflammation is good. That's truly how the body heals. And so when there's unresolved inflammation, that's when we get into trouble for some of these chronic autoimmune type conditions and things like that. So actually, resolution is an important part of the initial attack, if you will, on something, and then restoring the homeostasis. You know, the body always wants to go to its happy and balanced spot, if you will. So our natural innate immune system, so this is the artillery attack, if you will. This is when something is exposed to the body. We really don't know what it is yet. Basically, our F-15 fighter flights, as I call it, basically they just go out, they try to put the kibosh on whatever it is, you know, natural killer cells, complement system, kill it and get it out of there. Then we have the adaptive immune system. This is really where we learn what you are. We develop the antibodies, whether it's to natural infection or the vaccines that we're talking about, So when you get infected with whatever, the body goes, oh, okay, I killed you now. Now the B cells come in and say, hey, how can I protect you the next time? And we make antibodies to that. So if it comes around the next time, we have these memory cells, if you will, and the formula for how to best attack that system. So it's a pretty sophisticated system. And when it works beautifully. And that's why immune system optimization is key. We have to make sure the system is optimized. What are things that break it? And I'm going to go kind of briefly go through this. Heavy metals in the immune system. We're all exposed to a lot of toxins in the workplace now, in the environment, EMF, lights, but heavy metals is absolutely. So if you have somebody who's constantly getting sick, they're not well, look for heavy metals to see if they cause a lot of problems and a lot of havoc on the entire body system, but they can absolutely definitely suppress and tank your immune system. So that's definitely one area to look at. We know sleep. The whole world and society is sleep deprived, but this is really where restorative type stuff happen. And we know sleep and good quality sleep is important for you, but chronic sleep deprivation affects a lot of hormones. It increases cortisol levels. When your cortisol levels are elevated, this is when your body is going into attack mode, right? This is the tiger is chasing me, and that's not a time to thrive, if you will, and restore those body functions. So good quality sleep. This is also where immune system, our T helper cells, our antigen presenting cells, basically also kind of restore, rejuvenate, and really kind of get ready to fight the next day, if you will. We know autoimmune illnesses are skyrocketing, definitely more recently. They tend to skyrocket also in the perimenopausal to menopausal stages. And really that's a culmination of all of the bath or soup of toxins that we swim in on a daily basis, from the cleaning supplies that we use at home, to the health and beauty aids, to makeup, to work exposures and things like that. So really look at all the stuff actually, I just finished writing my book on pain management, but my next book is going to be how to detox your home room by room. And it's crazy when we really go through room by room. What are the things that we're exposed to on a daily basis in everyday living? So with autoimmune illnesses, definitely there's genetic predisposition, environmental triggers such as infection, certain foods, wheat, gluten, dairy, corn, and soy tend to be the most common in our country, at least. Chemical exposure, certain drugs can predispose people to autoimmune disease, and obviously stress and trauma. So again, this is where the immune system is always trying to balance. So we have two arms of the immune system, and they're always going in a seesaw, trying to kind of keep you as healthy as possible and as optimized as possible. What are the risk factors for autoimmune disease? Now, we know women of childbearing age. Women have a greater tendency for autoimmune than men. Why is that? Because women in general have a much more robust immune system. That's why really with COVID, we've seen the outcome for women. They really kick butt. They kick that COVID butt usually better than men. But that's probably due to some of the sex hormones. Why is that? Women have a much more robust immune system, but unfortunately, the price for that is a higher incidence of autoimmune disorders in women, because sometimes that system does go a little bit haywire and doesn't keep the checks and balances in place. And we see this with like lupus, type 1 diabetes, and so on. Fibromyalgia, which is really kind of a subset of an autoimmune. A lot of times fibromyalgia, women have what we call small fiber neuropathies. Sometimes it is one of the most common reasons for small fiber neuropathies is autoimmune illnesses. So that's one area to look at in fibromyalgia. They tend to also have higher levels of the substance P, or these inflammatory markers, which again tells you an immune system in dysregulation. So you definitely see a lot of the autoimmune illnesses. Hashimoto's thyroiditis, definitely much higher in women than men. Lupus, 9-to-1 ratio. Sjogren's, 9-to-1. Primary biliary cirrhosis, MS, definitely higher in women, rheumatoid arthritis, and so on. So that's really kind of the price, if you will, for having a more robust immune system. Rheumatoid arthritis, so it's very interesting. There's a role when people have HPA axis dysregulation, which again, when this fight and flight system is constantly on, because it is the system that fights infections, fights diseases, but sometimes, again, in rheumatoid arthritis, the concentration of glucocorticoid receptors, which is the stress receptors, if you will, for cortisol, were definitely were reduced and thought to be less likely in men due to the immunosuppressive effects of androgens. So definitely we are learning more and more and more really about the effects of hormones and immune system regulation. So we definitely know cortisol levels, if people have high or low cortisol levels, that really causes dysregulation on the immune system. We think more of the more recent data shows that really sick people or people with mold illnesses, Lyme disease, things like that, they tend to have this lower cortisol levels. And we used to think, oh my God, we got to get that up. But it's probably a response of the immune system. So we can liberate the immune system so it can fight these orders a bit better. But definitely pregnenolone, DHEA, which is one of the major adrenal hormones, have huge immunoregulatory control on the blood vessel, on the immune system. And so definitely flattening of the cortisol curves, we really look at that to look for adrenal function, immune regulation, because hypocortisol can also induce this intensified immune vigilance, if you will, where it's really it can cause this dysregulation of the immune system. So it's always, also a flattened cortisol curve has been shown to be very commonly seen in a lot of disorders. So we know women with cancer, when they have a flattened cortisol curve, they tend to have much worse outcomes of breast cancer treatments, worsened glucose control. We know definitely in diabetes, this is one of the things that we look at because we know cortisol can cause glucose dysregulation. We know also definitely could be a risk factor for congestive heart failure, heart attacks, cardiovascular disease, and so on. So definitely this is one that we really look for, and we really try to balance this. And this is where, again, really we used to think, oh my God, a flattened cortisol curve is bad. We got to bring it up because that's, Addison's disease, but sometimes that's the immune system reaction to an attack to really liberate it so it can really launch this all assault attack, if you will, on whatever it's seeing. Thyroid, again, thyroid optimization is very important for having a properly functioning immune system. The thyroid and the adrenals work very closely together, so you have to look at both. I always look at the thyroid as the thermostat and the adrenal system as the furnace. And so they work very closely together to regulate a lot of metabolic functions, but also immune system regulation. Estrogen, progesterone. This is why the incidence of autoimmune disorders tends to skyrocket in the perimenopause to menopausal stage. So a lot of times in autoimmune illnesses, we really try to look at hormonal balance, see if there's anything that we can do to help. That's why progesterone levels in pregnancy actually increase and skyrocket, because it's in an effort to immunosuppress the body from basically attacking that fetus, because it sees it as a foreign object, basically. And we think one of the links of autoimmune disease is this low progesterone levels that occur in the perimenopause to menopausal stage. Estrogen definitely increases also TNF alpha, which is one of the inflammatory markers, but it also decreases IL-10 and nitrous oxide, in the immune cells. So again, they have, we don't want to call it immunosuppressive or immunostimulatory action. They're really more immunomodulatory. And that's why it's very important to have the hormonal symphony, as we call it, in balance. Thyroid, adrenals, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, glucose, insulin, all of it really has to be in balance because all of them have actions on the immune system. A lot of the immune system cells have sex hormone receptors on them that really modulate them and also try to optimize it. You know, high progesterone levels, like I mentioned in pregnancy, can be immunosuppressive, but that's where you don't want to overdose women, in which we see sometimes, because you can immunosuppress them. Or also, if it's misbalanced with estrogen, it can cause glucose dysregulation and increased glucose levels. We know testosterone is important, obviously, in men and women. It has anti-inflammatory effects. It has definitely immunomodulatory effects. There's actually several trials going on with the NIH with COVID and hormones, and to see if we give men or women, you know, if we give men even estrogen and progesterone, can we have better outcomes with COVID, and also with women with testosterone, because definitely testosterone is very anti-inflammatory and modulatory. Prolactin and growth hormones, again, you know, growth hormone receptors are present, you know, on the lymphocytes. So again, lymphocytes tend to attack viruses when it sees them. So again, sometimes if people have very low growth hormone levels or adult onset growth hormone deficiency, it is one of the things that we look at to also modulate. VIP or vasopressin, vasoactive intestinal peptide. There's actually a few trials going on with that. We know for mold illness, VIP nasal spray is very important, if you will, in kind of bringing the regulatory symphony into tune per se, but they are looking at VIP also in viral illnesses such as COVID. DHEA, so DHEA is one of the immunomodulatory adrenal hormones that also is very important. So cortisol and DHEA really work very closely. They're almost like inverse relationships with the adrenals. So when cortisol levels are really high, the body secretes DHEA because it really tries to control the effects of high cortisol, which we know can cause hippocampal shrinkage in the brain, which is your center for memory and cognition and all that good stuff. So DHEA levels, when cortisol levels or people are under high amounts of stress, DHEA levels will go up in an effort to also protect the actions in the brain. So DHEA is the other one. It definitely stimulates production of IL-2. It inhibits natural killer cell differentiation, and it prevents the increase in age-related IL cell production in lymphocytes. So again, very immunoregulatory. Younger people, when you see them, they're constantly catching a cold or flu after each other. This is definitely one of the things where you want to look at their cortisol DHEA ratios in the body. So it's a couple of things that what can we do to kind of optimize our system when it has gone awry? Low dose naltrexone, very effective treatment, really low dose naltrexone. This is really for opioid and, heroin addiction per se. We used to use it, but now we're finding that this low dose naltrexone treatment is very effective for regulating and modulating immune system. So in autoimmune disorders, people that get sick all the time, Haley syndrome, there's over 400 articles now that have been published on low dose naltrexone that really helps bring the immune system into balance. And it's really nice. And this is all the beneficial effects of that. The other really neat thing about LDN is it's probably one of the only drug classes that we have thus far on the market, if you will, that really helps with brain, what we call neuroinflammation. So even anxiety, depression, even for inflammatory depression can be very helpful for that. So that's really a lot of interesting things to look at. And then here, there's a lot of, the typical stuff that you learned about pro-resolving mediators or SPM. So remember when the immune system, so now we hear a lot about this post-COVID syndrome, long haulers, all these different things. What is that? It's really an immune system that still has gone nuts, if you will. So sometimes taking a compound called SPM or pro-resolving mediators can be very helpful in bringing that system into balance. We're actually doing a few clinical trials with some centers now, really looking at low-dose naltrexone with SPMs and metformin, even to see if we can kind of regulate some of that stuff. So pro-resolving mediators, really, they stop this inflammatory cell recruitment. They kind of help rebalance the attack or the artillery system. And then it really helps with induction of tissue repair. Gut, I know you guys have heard tons from the audience here. Probiotics are very helpful. L-glutamine can really help modulate the attack in the gut by sealing the holes, if you will. Digestive enzymes. So a lot of times we think for digestive enzymes, it's really just to mainly help digest food. But actually, if you take them on an empty stomach, they're very anti-inflammatories. And there's actually a lot of data out of Germany on specific types of digestive enzymes that can be very helpful in out of control inflammation or even post-viral inflammation, chronic Lyme, chronic EBV, and so on. Omega-3 fatty acids, of course, you can Google any study in any disease and you will find that omega-3 fatty acids are very helpful in that. GLA or borage oil, evening primrose oil has been shown to be very helpful in certain autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis. Of course, optimizing vitamin D, so much data on vitamin D, obviously in a variety of illnesses and immunomodulatory effects for autoimmune illnesses, for viral illnesses, and so on. CoQ10 is really the mitochondrial helper. So what we see sometimes post-viral illnesses is they really tend to attack the mitochondria, which is your powerhouse. So sometimes giving patients things like coenzyme Q10, D-ribose, ATP, helpers like NAD can be very helpful in kind of regenerating cellular powerhouses and energy. So that's something to really look at. DHEA, as we discussed, definitely sometimes it decreases with age, but the demand can increase under physiological stressful conditions like an illness, viral illness, surgeries, chronic illnesses, and things like that. Lots of literature into the autoimmune literature about the effective use of DHEA as an immune modulator in a treatment for a variety of autoimmune illnesses. And then acetyl D-glucosamine, acetylglutathione. So glutathione has been shown to have really antiviral properties, but it's also the #1 antioxidant and kind of detoxifier helper in the body. A lot of people are deficient in glutathione levels. Curcumin, you're very familiar with, again, great anti-inflammatory. There's over 2,000 clinical trials on the use of curcumin in a variety of inflammatory conditions. And then boswellia, kind of similar to curcumin, but we use that more for, we use it a lot in migraines actually because it penetrates the blood-brain barrier a little bit better. Selenium is another one we rarely talk about. So if you eat 1 or 2 Brazilian nuts a day, it will give you your daily requirements of selenium. Each Brazilian nut roughly has about 100 micrograms of selenium. So eat your food. I always say eat your vitamins. They're much better quality vitamins than really the pills that you might get. But selenium, critical for a lot of, for a lot of things, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, but most importantly for immune system. It's really one of the critical minerals that is needed for proper functioning of our immune system. So selenium, 200 micrograms is what's recommended daily. And really the main goal is, yes, we will get inflammation. We want inflammation, we want attack, but the whole idea is when the insult is over, we want to go back to that balance and we want to have this resolution of inflammation. So when you see a patient, you always want to look, what type is it? Is it general inflammation, innate, adaptive immune system? What part of the immune system is the generator? We didn't even talk about mast cell or mast cell activation syndrome. What was the original cause and is it still around? Can we get rid of it? How do I resolve this by, removing heavy metals, maybe removing mold, toxins, Lyme disease, other, causative agents? And then how can we bring regulation back to the dysregulation of the immune system? And here's my contact info if you have any questions. I know, sorry, I threw lots of stuff at you very quickly. It's Misha's fault because he told me to talk really quickly and short. We'll blame it on him.
That's right. It's always my fault. That's good. Quick question before you disappear, before we push over to Yael. You guys do make VIP?
VIP? No, not. We're looking at that. We should be probably fairly soon, but not yet.
Let me know when you do.
Yeah.
Oops.
You're on mute, I think. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I didn't. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Can
That's good.
someone say something? Okay, Misha, thank
Can
you.
hear you, yes.
You're good.
Great, because I also lost sound for a second. So I'm just going to lead us in a little bit of what we might call nutritional movement. And what I decided to do, we can all thank Luann, who I think is here today, the other day, for insisting that I do this. Dr. Kogan will often suggest that it's really good for us to get moving first thing in the morning and for us to get the sunlight specifically earlier in the morning. And over the course of the pandemic, I started to do that, and I started to play with a walking stick. So we're going to do a little bit of exercise today with, and I'll show you what I have. This is a stick that I illegally took out of a park, and I won't mention which one it was. You can do this as well with a broom or a mop. And you can also do this if you've got like a long tie or an elastic band, that will also work. So I decided to start doing this because I have all kinds of joint issues, and this for me was a really wonderful way of playing with movement in a different way. So feel free to go and grab something that you could use. Again, like a broom or a mop is perfect. I'm going to give people just a minute. Oh, good. Luann has something. Luann is like showing off that she has something, which I love. Awesome. I see Jennifer has something that she can use. Ellen has, oh yeah, that's perfect. One of those mops is good. You know, maybe something that's nice and long. And we're gonna kind of end with a little bit of breath work, but we'll just start right away with a little bit of movement. And so what I'll invite you to do is you can use your stick as a stability. So I'm just going to use it the way that I would do downward facing dog. So I'm just putting the stick on the ground or the mop on the ground. In your PT office, they have really fancy like dowels, they're called, but you could really use anything. And I'm just going to give myself a little stretch here. I'm just walking back. My knees can be super bad. In fact, I could bend one leg and then the other. I've got a yoga mat here. You might have like a piece of carpeting. And while I'm doing this, I'm just beginning to take some deep breaths. By the way, if you don't have a stick, but you have a piece of furniture, like a bookshelf, then feel free to do that today, or a back of a chair. And honestly, what I always tell my yoga students is the most important thing that we can do for the nervous system, and the nervous system plays a role with the immune system as well, is just to take some deep breaths. So if nothing else, just breathing here with me. And then I'm gonna come to a stand. I'm just standing up. I'm gonna take, maybe you have a strap. I'm just going to go nice and wide, and I'm just going to get myself used to bringing that stick up and down. So we're just going to do this a few times. You can do this with your breath if you want. You could go nice and slow. And really just checking out all of our ranges of motion are slightly different. And for some of us, especially if your stick is about 5 feet wide and you go nice and wide, you might be able to take the stick back down. And then for sure, we can do this with the breath, inhaling as we come up, exhaling as we come down. I'm just kind of going. It's so much fun to see you guys doing this. This makes me happy. Right, and I'm just, I'm not trying to like become like the Rocky Horror guy with no neck, if anyone is old enough to remember that. I'm really trying to be gentle with my shoulders, keeping the shoulders away from the ears. Good. And then I'm just gonna, just for fun, I'm gonna keep that stick back behind me, and I'm gonna change how I'm holding it. So now I've got an underhanded grip, right? My palms are facing forward. I'm gonna go wide again. The stick is about at my sacrum, so below the belt line. And I'm just gonna take it up, just no pain, no pain. And I'm gonna come down. And again, I could do that with my breath. This is also really good for anti-schlumpasana. And because I am doing this, I am seeing some chats, and I'm assuming that they might be for Dr. Sahar. But if you've got a question, just feel free to unmute yourself, or someone can read it, because it's too hard to multitask. Good, and you might feel like your shoulder blades here are just gently squeezing together. That's awesome. All right, and then I'm just gonna take that stick, couple of different choices. You could just hang on like this. You could take it back behind you if you really like that sense of stretch, or take it over your head. And we're just gonna do really simple, right? So lots of different possibilities. My feet are about, I don't know, the distance of my outer hips. And I'm not trying to go super fast. That's like a whole nother thing. I'm just going nice and slow. If this makes you dizzy, just look ahead. And I'm just enjoying a little bit of movement here. And again, I'm doing this in my room because the sound, I live in Columbia Heights. It's kind of annoying to be on Zoom in my little backyard, but I would often do this in the morning in the backyard. Good. And then we're just gonna take this stick, and again, you could hang out like this or like this. And I'm just gonna bend from side to side. And if you prefer to stay still, then do that. Could just have some fun there. I'm just going to go a little bit from side to side. At the same time, I'm noticing, God, I was clenching my jaw. Does anyone else do that? So I just opened up my mouth and moved it around. One day I'm going to be as cool as Sage, who comes here and films outdoors. Oh, it's so nice to see you guys doing this. All right. And just kind of notice, just take a moment here, feel what you're feeling in your body. Just sort of notice, yeah, there might even be some shaking that you want to do. And then we're gonna keep kind of playing with this. So I'm gonna start to draw big circles. And the way that this is it doesn't really matter which way you go, but I've got one hand in my back pocket and one hand above my head, other hand in my back pocket, other hand above my head. And I'm just gonna do these circles do these as slowly as you like. I mean, eventually you'll want to have fun like cheerleaders and do all sorts of fun stuff, right? But we're really working on maintaining a healthy mobility in the body, which is, again, why literally some movement practitioners call this nutritious movement. And this for me is really the antidote to Zoom meetings. Good. And then let's just take it in the opposite direction. So hands in pocket, hand by head. And of course, like, you know, you might be doing much smaller movements as well. So do whatever works better with your body. Nice. Awesome. And we could once again, maybe this time with the hands in front or with the hands in the back, just take a couple of those rotations from side to side. This is actually good for the eyes as well. Aldous Huxley did eye exercises, which included swinging from side to side. He was practically blind and was afraid it would ruin his writing career. But if it makes you dizzy, don't do it. Okay, and then let's just a couple of more things. We're going to use the stick again as a balance. And we're going to come back into some sort of lunge. So I'll just use my right foot in front. I'm going to step my left foot back. I could have my left foot, I don't know if you guys can see my feet. I could have my left foot flat on the ground, like warrior one, for those of you that have done yoga, or I could have the heel up off the ground. I'm using the stick for stability, but I'm also kind of making sure that I'm not doing the Elvis, right? So if I tend to put a lot of pressure onto the inner knee, I could also keep the stick just there right by the inner knee or in front. And then maybe I'm going to take the opposite arm up. You could lower that arm. So we could inhale when we raise that left arm up, exhale when we take it down. Just do that as that feels good to you. And a little extra credit. So either keep doing that, or if your balance feels okay, take a side bend to the right and notice how that really activates through the hip flexor. Good. And then let's just come back and we'll take the other side. So again, just stepping the opposite foot back. Your right foot now could be flat on the ground, or you could have the heel lifting up. That's just a matter of personal preference. Inhaling and exhaling. Inhaling. Good. Just letting it go. Maybe everybody will do one more of these together. I'm looking up because that really helps me open up through my chest. And then only if you want, either keep doing this or go ahead and take a side bend towards the left. Getting into now that right hip flexor. Good. And then we'll come to standing. Okay, one more kind of fun balancing thing. Again, you could use a chair. So if you don't have a stick, that's fine. But or a mop, that's also fine. Mine is kind of a little sideways. So I'm just gonna have both of my hands on the stick, and I'm just gonna lift up through one leg. In this case, I'm just lifting up through my right, and I'm just taking it down. So I'm trying to keep the rest of my body pretty straight. I'm really working on the lateral hips, which, by the way, if you're like me and you have low back pain, a lot of times these need to be strengthened. And I could just keep doing that, or I could begin to, and I could move the stick a little bit to give me a little bit more stability. I could begin to come into more of a balance pose here. I could have both hands on the stick. I could drop one or raise one. I could play a little bit with different movements. Maybe coming into a more traditional tree, right? Yoga pose. And then I'm just going to stop for right now. But you could have a lot of fun if you're working on your balance. I think balance is one of the most important things to do. And then we're just going to go to the other side. So I'm just going to go ahead, both hands on the stick, just getting a little bit of work for now that left hip. I could stay right here, or I could start to play with tipping myself as far over as feels okay. I could have both hands firmly on the stick, or I could begin to challenge myself a little bit in a little bit of a different way. Good. And then I'm just going to come on out of this. I'm just going to notice how I'm feeling. We could close our eyes. Good. As you get really good at this, there's fun things you could do. I think the thing that I was doing that Luann liked was starting to play with twirling the stick. And that's it's for me, this is wonderful for wrist rotation as well as shoulder. And you can start to also play with walking while you're doing it forward and back. So there might be some former cheerleaders on the phone, on the Zoom call. Yeah, if you get used to going in one direction, maybe play with taking it in the other. There's nothing like doing this outside. Awesome. I'm seeing all these twirling screens. I'm like, I'm enamored of everybody here. Okay. Let's just pause here. Come back to your seat because I'm just looking at the time. And I want to leave a couple of minutes after if there's any question. Okay, so from here, just go ahead, everybody. Find a comfortable seat. Maybe your feet are on the ground, so you might be scooching a little bit more forward. I'm really hoping that you could feel some energy moving, some circulation. Yeah, how are people feel? Notice your shoulders. So maybe close your eyes if that's comfortable. If it's not comfortable, just don't look at the screen. Just sort of have a soft gaze somewhere, maybe outside. Connect with your breath, if you will. That breath which really brings in a sense of inspiration, a sense of wonder. And the exhalation, which really allows us to detox, to let go, to learn to be like the trees in this beautiful season of fall. With every inhale, feeling our life a little bit more vital. And with every exhale, feeling our capacity to relax And it is in this relaxation that we renew. Good. Let's just take one more inhale here. On your exhale, I want to invite everyone just to gently drop your chin towards your chest, just so that if your eyes were closed, you can flutter them open. Take a minute and just look around your room. Notice the colors, the play of light and shadow. There might be an object that reminds you of someone you love or a photo. Good. And then as you're ready, let's all just come back into the Zoom room. I am going to remove the spotlight so that you could see each other's faces, even if it's a photo screensaver. What a beautiful community that you all have created here. Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah. Yeah, movement saves me too. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Monica.
Thank you, Yael. Thank you, Dr. Swidan. Yeah, I'll see everybody next Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. It's a little chilly, but still beautiful outside. I hope you spend time in nature.